Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathy Patterson. I'm Director of Enrollment here at the McLean School, and we're so pleased to have you with us for our first Experts Talk webinar series. Today, I'm pleased to have our Math Department Chair, Selene Abazu, and middle school math teacher Robin Wise with us to discuss math support and acceleration here at McLean School. One of the hallmarks of McLean's transformative approach to education is that we meet the needs of all learners, focusing first on their strengths, and then if there are some challenges, look to see how we might support those. Selene and Robin will be digging into just how that's done with math here at McLean. I hope you find today's webinar informative and ask that you save your questions for the end when we've dedicated some time for Q&A. Feel free to chat me, Kathy Patterson, as questions arise, and I'll save them for the end. Please note that we will be recording today's session, but only the speakers will be recorded. So with that, I'll let Selene and Robin take things away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Selene Abazu. As Kathy mentioned, I'm the department chair, and I also teach Algebra 1 and Honors Algebra 2 in the upper school. I have over 20 years of experience in the field of education, both as a classroom teacher, as well as working with students individually and in small groups when I owned a tutoring center. And I have two children at McLean in 3rd and 6th grade. So our guiding framework at McLean is the abilities model. And what that means is that when we first start working with students, we identify what their strengths are and then embed support as needed. We know that students who struggle in one area have strength in others. And so we try to harness those to really pitch to their bat to ensure that they get a taste of success. And usually once that happens, the learning unlocks and we see that they're a lot more comfortable in the subject and as the fear of math disappears.
Hi, thanks, Selene. I'm Robin Wise. As Kathy mentioned, I teach middle school math, mainly pre-algebra and algebra to 8th graders, although I do have other students in those classes occasionally. And I have also over 20 years of experience teaching various grade levels, but I've pretty much settled into middle school for the most of that time. As you can see, and to build on what Selene said, we really look at ways that we can engage the students with math, because we know that really the only way to learn it is to have some experience with it. So it may not look like a teacher giving instruction and then students practicing the way we might see it in a lot of other classrooms. We really try to have fun. And I asked some of my classes this morning, they knew that I was going to be talking, and I asked them, what should I say about math at McLean, just out of curiosity, what their take on that was. And that's exactly what so many of them quoted, is that they really feel like they're having hands-on, but they're experiencing math in different ways here than they've experienced other schools. And so the focus for them is they see it as having fun and learning in a different way. The focus for us is we're really looking at ways to integrate the concrete, and then allow that to grow into representations, and then to eventually have an understanding of abstract concepts, which doesn't just come right away just from a teacher saying something about abstract. So we know that progression is really important, but the students have to be engaged and have to buy into that.
And the benefit of the small classes at McLean is that students really feel safe to ask their questions or make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes. So it really creates a warm environment that students can learn in. And for teachers, it gives us the opportunity to get to know our students both on an academic level as well as a personal level. And then we can use those connections to work with the students and help them learn and feel more comfortable in math class. We also are able to group students in groups that are either more supported or less supported, which allows us to teach to the way they learn best. And it also allows us to, change gears in class when we notice that a student needs extra support. The teachers at McLean are experts in learning needs and differentiated instruction, and that is organized differently at different levels. In K through 6, the teachers teach cross-curricularly, and in grades 7 through 12, they're content experts. And lastly, we don't have a pull-out model at McLean. The math specialists instead push into classes to either support the teachers or work in small groups within the environment of the class.
There's a great blog that our K-12 Master Reading Coordinator, Natalie Stapert, wrote titled Teach Kids, Not Curriculum. And the concept of that blog is that while a teacher can fill their shelves with curriculum and pull from that and read exactly what should be taught and how, that's really not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we know that, and that's not what it is at McLean. We don't teach to a script. I can even have 4 sections of the same subject, and it goes differently every section because I'm meeting the needs or trying to meet the needs of each of the students that are in each one of those sections, and that might look different throughout the day. It might also look different from year to year. So we are aware of and conscious of the Common Core standards. We are conscious of the NCTM, the National Council of Teaching Mathematics standards, and we do align to all of that to make sure that our students are getting what they need, but in order to continue on in math successfully in a college prep setting.
Yep, and that flexibility allows us to pull from different sources as opposed to being stuck to one textbook or one learning tool. And being in the upper school, I can confirm that the graduates of McLean leave us with all the knowledge that they will be expected to have when they get to college, given whatever course is on their transcript.
And we're constantly looking at how we can respond to them, and even most recently, most of us have experience having to move online really quickly, and so we are always looking for ways that we can reach the students, depending on the changing environment.
As a K through 12 school, it's important to make sure that we're keeping connections between divisions as well as disciplines. And because the size of McLean makes it easy to do that. In fact, I'm always connecting with the lower school and middle school math specialists to make sure that that the continuity of our curriculum is there. Also, I often connect with teachers in other subjects. For example, science is the main one, to make sure that what's happening in our classes matches and makes sense. Last year, for example, I was talking to a science teacher and realized that he was expecting my algebra students or they were using the quadratic formula, but I hadn't taught it yet. So that was an issue because he was having to teach it. And what we did was we discussed the order in which we were teaching topics so that this year that didn't happen again. And now the students will have what they need when they get to the topic at hand.
Yeah, and that same thing is going on actually in middle school conversations, and we're making sure that again, the science classes know what they can expect from our math classes based on what we've taught and vice versa. And it just makes it a stronger program.
Yeah.
So I love this slide. So this is showing some of the games and the projects and the different things that our students get to experience across all 3 divisions. You can see some carefully chosen games going on with a teacher, of course, and then some upper school students sitting on the floor, enjoying engaging with that. The color-coded mobiles are a project that we do in pre-algebra that we're actually just starting again, and the students were pretty excited that they get to do this. And then of course all kinds of other resources. We're both, Celine and I are on Twitter sharing some of these things sometimes, and I love seeing what she's doing in her classes because it gives me ideas, but also it just solidifies how important that is across the board. So some examples that we use in our classes by starting class every day with some sort of a question that is low risk for students to engage in, but really allows for some deep thought. We do some scavenger hunts where they're really practicing the math the same as they would just with a worksheet or on paper, but it gets them up and moving around the room, which we know is very important to have that physical activity. We engage in a lot of math discussion and dialogue, validating students' thoughts and being able to identify different places where there is success than maybe they would just recognize by looking at paper. I have another example. I had some students a few years ago, and we were working on slope, and there was an opportunity in an NCTM, the National Council of Teachers Mathematics publication, calling for students to try out a certain problem and send their work in. So I just opened it up as just a conversation, and then the conversation kind of took off, and I asked for students to give up their time during lunch if they were interested. And they thought it was fun because it wasn't a class assignment and it wasn't something where there was necessarily a right or wrong. These were all things that they expressed to me. And they came in and just had really great conversations. We submitted, and their work was actually quoted in that publication, which was really exciting for those students to see a year or so later when their work was shown in there. And that was following because of a lot of that fun in the way that we were engaging with it and presenting it.
Yeah, it definitely helps students when they're having to engage with math in a different way than just a worksheet. And it's funny, as I was posting to Twitter one day and scrolling through my feed and realized my students spent a good 50% of their time on the floor or hovering over one table working on a group activity. And that's what makes learning more fun. Now, we also acknowledge that sometimes difficulties in math stem from a math-related diagnosis, but other times they're related to other issues such as anxiety, dyslexia, and executive functioning challenges. And we do everything that we can, of course, to address that and to help support students. I have one example of a student last year in Algebra 1. He had an easy time in math, but he had dyslexia. And when we got to word problems, he started to struggle a lot suddenly. What was great about our small class sizes is that I was able to read all the problems to him whenever we had time to work on practice problems. And when I started doing that, that immediately unlocked the concept for him. He was able to write the equations and solve the problems very easily. And it was just magical to see how this one little accommodation was able to help him so much. But the first day I did that, I then reflected and wondered if maybe it made him feel singled out. So I pulled him aside the next day and asked him about that. And his reaction blew me away. It was just, well, no, that's what I need. And the other students are getting what they need. So it was really nice to see that getting that extra support was not stigmatized at all in that class. Ultimately, our goal at McLean is to help students learn about themselves and self-advocate so that they can build the skills they need to be successful, in the classroom and beyond when they leave us. And one thing that I do for that is I always encourage students to find patterns in their mistakes. Oftentimes they're repeated mistakes, and if they're able to identify that and keep it in the forefront of their minds, then when they work on the test or a more high-risk activity, hopefully it'll help them not make that mistake. And of course, we always send the message that mistakes should be embraced and learned from.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your words.
Okay.
Another challenge that can come about in math and ability to learn math has to do, I think, just with experience and environment. We have a lot of students across the board, not just at middle school level, but who might label themselves as bad at math, or I can't learn math, I don't know math. And of course, in middle school, we really feel like this is a pivotal time where we work a lot on that growth mindset and really thinking about the abilities and learning that we have the abilities to be able to do something. Sometimes students have experience being slow at reciting multiplication tables, and that translates as I'm bad at math in a lot of conversation, but that's not really the truth. And so we work at trying to understand that all students can be successful, and we're helping them to find those ways to be successful. Something that we've been able to offer at McLean now starting in 7th grade is an ungraded math class. And so we have a 7th grade ungraded option as well as pre-algebra option. The students do all the same work. They have all the same assessments. They actually have the same teacher as who's teaching the graded classes, but we take away that that sort of need to satisfy a certain number or letter grade, and instead focus on the learning. And I know that Mr. Saxenian likes to tell the story of some students that were overheard in a study hall, I believe, and I think it was even an after-school study hall, and there was a student working on something, and somebody else wanted them to play a game, and they're like, "Why are you working so hard on this math? You're in the ungraded class. It doesn't even matter." They said, "Of course it matters. I want to learn it." And that was such an amazing thing to hear coming from an 8th grader. That they really were starting to see the value in working towards learning and working towards understanding, and that a lot of times can come about if we take away that pressure and define learning in a different way. So we've been able to do that.
That's really wonderful outcome of that. So if we could play that video, I'll explain what it is in a minute.
All right, Geometry Honors Chapter 2 test. Read and listen to each question carefully and answer all parts. Show your work for partial credit. Box/circle your answers.
All right, so that is an example of a geometry honors test that was read by the coordinator of learning services. I'll spare you listening to the entire thing, but it's an example of the way we make accommodations accessible to students. This is easily created by either the coordinator of learning services or teachers for students. And then what we do is we put them on an iPad, and students can have them have it for the test. So it would help students like the one I spoke about earlier. The difference between what we do at McLean is most schools require official paperwork to have access to these accommodations, but at McLean, a student just needs to ask us for it. And in fact, we ask them if they want it, and then we make it available. In fact, I gave a test to Algebra 1 students this morning, and I had 3 students who were new to McLean this year and didn't really know what this was about. So they asked if they could have a recorded test. So I gave it to them, and they all tried it, and they all said, "No, it's not for me. I prefer reading it." But I think it's really great that they have the option of trying it and seeing if it helps. And if it helps, then we'll do it all year. And if not, then that's it. Move on to the next thing. Beyond accommodations, our small classes allow students to have access to teachers. And as I mentioned earlier, we get to know them really well, and we get to know, how their brains work, which makes us more successful at working with them. And every level has some sort of time where students can work with teachers. So I know in the middle school, there's a resource period, there's study halls, and also tutorials in the upper school that happen daily. And that's a time where students can either just work on their homework if that's what they feel like doing, or if they need help, they can go see the teacher and get extra help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would echo that, and I agree. I love that all of these tools are actually embedded in our classes just naturally, and we teach accommodations and we teach supports to be used until they're not needed anymore, and then we can help the students to understand that that's not just checking boxes of I have to learn a calculator on this or I have to do this. They really can learn to say, oh, I don't need this to be read to me anymore, or I don't need that way of doing things. And so it's nice that it's embedded into all of those classes, and it looks different for different students at different points in the year. We can see the progression of that.
Yeah. And you know, we are aware that there are some formal exams like AP and standardized tests where official documentation is needed for those accommodations. And the coordinator of learning services and the college counseling department are always willing to help families navigate the process to get all the paperwork that they need to make sure their students have the accommodations that they need. We also know that some students' strengths are in math, and their needs obviously also need to be addressed. So for those students, we have, depending on the level, various ways of meeting that need. In the K through 6, we have the small groups that I mentioned earlier, which are fluid, so they can move between levels if they realize that they understand math better than they thought. And also it allows us to either give students more support or more challenges based on the group that they're placed in. And I love that those placements are not set in stone. Teachers reassess the students throughout the year and move them accordingly if need be. In grades 7 and 8, students can take accelerated classes, which includes for 8th graders to take in upper school classes if they're emotionally ready. So we're very careful about that because we do know that being a middle school student in upper school class can be a challenge in and of itself. And at the upper school level, we've got honors courses, AP courses, and various college level courses that are offered as well.
I would add to not just emotionally ready, but executive functioning skills are really examined closely to make sure that students are not being set up for a challenging situation just based on that. We know that teaching math isn't just about getting certain skills or concepts down from the math list, but really it is looking at all of those things and how they're going to play into the student's day as a whole.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Selene and Robin. That was very informative and certainly very helpful. Selene and Robin have offered their emails here. So if anyone that's on the webinar with us, if you'd like to contact them individually with other questions, you're welcome to. Otherwise, please, we have a few questions in the chat, but please chat a question to me, Kathy Patterson, and I will be happy to address them. So the ones that we have in here now, one parent is asking, what is a typical math class size in the upper school? And maybe we want to address it, for the middle and upper school.
So currently for the upper school, we have classes that are as small as 3 students. And I think the largest one we have is 14 students right now.
Yeah, and the middle school probably ranges, yeah.
Yeah, it's similar. Most of ours hover between 10 and 13 right now, and 14 is also my largest. Yeah.
Okay, great. Other question from Mary. Is there an expected amount of time that kids should be working on homework each day, or are the study halls designed to allow kids to get work done here at school?
So in the upper school, I think we have a variety of what happens with that, just because students work at different paces. In my class, I often have students that don't have math homework, and I also have students that do. Study halls are helpful to get it done. And something else that I wanted to note is that for students who need that extra time to get their homework done, one accommodation that I give is to have them do either just the even problems or the odd problems of the worksheet that I'm giving them for practice. There's never a ton of homework. It's always manageable, and if it's a lot for students, then I do that accommodation.
Right.
Yeah,
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
was going to add, Kathy, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Something else that I do, and I think is done in other classes as well, is instead of assigning a certain number of problems that needs to be completed, for example, I give a time expectation and ask them to engage with it for a certain amount of time. And then that's data for me too. I know that there's a difference between a student who's accomplished 1 problem versus somebody who's knocked out 20 problems. I can get what I need from that without it being the pulling your hair out at home for 3 hours trying to complete an assignment for fear of,
Right.
lowering a grade on that.
actually, as a parent of a sixth grader, I know the message that we got at back to school night at the beginning of the year from all the teachers were, make sure homework is not a frustrating thing. You know, they're getting the practice in. If it's leading to tears, stop, send me an email. I'll support your child when we get back to school. So we really don't want that to be a stress factor for students.
Great.
And that's actually, I'll just add one more thing. One of the things that my students actually said when I asked them for their input on what to talk about, one of my students did mention that at McLean, his experience has been very different than math classes at other schools, that they didn't just receive instruction and then get a worksheet with 15 problems for homework. He felt like when there was homework, it was a little bit different, and he could see the value and where he was learning in that. And that the learning really started in the classroom, as opposed to how he was describing some other classes that he's been in.
Great. Another parent asked, I am wondering what AP courses are offered and at what age. And I don't know, I'm like, there's overall, I think there's 13 AP courses, but they're not, of course, all in math.
So currently in math, we offer AP Calculus this year, and I know that next year, and there's multivariable calculus that's also offered on the years where we have students that need it. So we don't have it going on this year, but I believe next year is going to happen again. In terms of the age, so to get into AP Calculus, you need to have finished honors pre-calc. So whatever age that happens, so there's a range. I know I teach honors algebra 2, and last year in my class I had students from grade 9 through 11. And so those students went on to pre-calculus and the following year to AP Calc.
Great, thank you so much. Some other questions that I know I'm asked often is, you know, now that we're hopefully on the heels of the pandemic, for students that come to us that perhaps were in a school for those 2 years, you know, 18 months where they weren't in school and law or that.
I think Kathy's feed, I think.
That has or here at McLean, where, you know, we were able to be open for much of the time.
Kathy, you kind of cut out in there, but I think I can guess what your question was, and you can stop me if
sorry, I don't know why.
But I think you were asking about students who maybe were at other schools and kind of lost some learning time, and so they may come in with some gaps and things in the math, kind of how we respond to that or what we're doing for that. Is that? I don't know. So I actually met with a family just this morning, and that's a situation that we're looking at, and so we're able to move schedules and allow for some extra support if it looks like the student has the skills and the motivation to be able to kind of catch up. We can do that internally. We also have opportunities to move into different classes. I don't know if I'm still.
On.
Are there if there are any other questions, go ahead and chat me, since I think Kathy's having technical difficulties.
Sorry, I'm back now. Can you hear me now? It just closed and the whole Zoom closed. I didn't do anything, but and then the other question was about what we do for new students that join us as far as like placement tests, like how we figure out, you know, if a student is ready for an honors class or ready to or should take the ungraded classes that you mentioned in the middle school.
Mm-hmm. We do have our I'm going to mess up the title, but basically our math specialist in the middle school, she has a long title. She does interview and does engage in some placement testing, and a lot of times that testing is then shared with the teachers of the student's grade. So it might be me to look at and just see where the skills align with what is in our classrooms. So we place based on all of that, and then we respond as the year goes on. And as Celine mentioned earlier, you know, it's not an etched in stone tracking per se, and so we can update that. But it is, at least for the middle school, we use placement tests and interview information.
For the upper school, there's a placement test, and sometimes I just call the families and have a conversation, and to see what we feel is the better choice. In the upper school, it's a little trickier to place to move between, let's say, grade level math and honors math, just because, especially as we move on throughout the year, just because content has been taught that the student will have missed. So I always aim to place students in, if we have a doubt, in honors first, and then have them move down if they feel the content is too challenging, and that's been working well for us.
I don't see, let me just check the chat one more time to see if there are any other questions. I don't see, oh, hold on. I think one just came in. When do you do the placement testing, and is that done after acceptance? So I can answer that. Yes, it's done once a student has been accepted and chooses to enroll. The placement tests are usually done later in the spring. And then there's another question from Mary: is ninth grade a natural intake year? Yes, our intake years are kindergarten, third grade, sixth grade, and ninth grade. We often, have space in other grades, just depending on the year. We are, as some of you probably have learned, are opening a second campus where we're going to move the lower school just up the road. So kindergarten through fourth grade will be there starting in September, which will give us more space here. And generally speaking, the school enrollment grows by about 5% a year. So we will be adding some students. Someone else asked, there are currently 200 students in both the middle and the upper school, and right around 100 students in the lower school. So there's about, per grade, it varies. There's 62 in the freshman class. There's right around 60 in the sophomore class, and the junior, senior class are a little smaller, as we had a cap on the upper school for many years, where we could only have a total of 140 students. So the senior class is a bit smaller, 45 in this. Other questions, feel free to chat to me. I want to certainly thank Celine and Robin for their time today. For those parents that are joining us that are not currently McLean student or McLean families, our application deadline is coming up on January 20th. We do have 2 open houses remaining on Thursday evening, December 1st, and also Saturday, January 7th. So feel free you can sign up for those on our website. I put my email in the chat, and if you have another question about admissions, I'm certainly happy to respond to those. We do have 2 other webinars that are coming up too. I don't have the exact dates on my mind, but they are going to focus on dyslexia and also on executive functioning skills. So thank you everyone for joining us. And again, thank you, Robin and Celine, for your time today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.